All right, welcome everyone. We'll let people into the event tonight. This is a very special event. Welcome to Powerhouse Arena's virtual book series. My name is Chris. I'm the events coordinator. And tonight we're very happy to be hosting the launch of Seven Demons by Aidan Truhen. We have some special surprises in store for you. Among them is that he'll be in conversation with Liberty Hardy of Book Riot. You can buy copies of the book at powerhousebookstores.com. The link is in the event page, and I will also post it in the chat. And if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And Nick, Aidan, and Liberty will take your questions at the end of the event. But first, let me play a short video.
So in 2016, I guess, I wrote the first Jack Price novel, and it was the wrong moment for me to have a book coming out. So we also created this character of Aidan Truhen, and Aidan would never be seen in public without a mask. And we had some fun with it. It was very, very weird. My wife refers to him as that weird guy. But the fun thing today is that I get to do this without a mask.
Hi, I'm Aidan Truhen. That was way harder than it looks. Hi. It's just me.
Here I am. I was like, why isn't anything happening? Nick Hargaway, hello.
Hello.
Should I call you Aidan for this?
Say again?
Should I call you Aidan for tonight, or?
You will confuse me enormously if you do. Almost no one has ever called me that.
It's true, because no one knew it was you.
No, and well, but even when I was doing, because I really did, I went and did bookshop events in a mask and sunglasses. But even when I was doing that, I only heard the word Aidan like a couple of times. You know, it just kind of, people would say kind of this way, and because they were quite freaked out because there was this weird guy wearing a mask in their bookshop, they would, you know, kind of just like point and worry and make me sit down.
Yeah. It's Banksy. You were Banksy for a little while.
I do not think I was Banksy. I think people would be much more excited if it was Banksy. And like,
but they didn't know that you weren't. I mean, you could.
No, that is true. I could have claimed to be Banksy. I did think of claiming to be Elena Ferrante. I thought that would be great. Because
another good one.
Yeah.
Yep.
I thought that was good.
So I'm going to ask you some questions tonight.
Yes.
Before I do that, would you mind reading a little bit from your new book, Seven Demons, and maybe give us like a quick synopsis of the book?
Yes, I will do that. This is a slightly weird thing for me, actually, because this will be the first time that I've read Seven Demons. Well, it's the first time I've read Seven Demons, but it's the first time I've read a Jack Price story in my own voice. Because when I was doing the stuff before, I had a selection of crazy voices because I didn't want anybody to know it was me, which was, I mean, it was ridiculous, right? But you know, so I used the voice of the dog from the Aristocats for a while. You know, I had a kind of, hi, I'm Aidan, hi, it's great to talk to you today, and so on.
Oh my goodness.
I had a whole thing going on. I was,
when you were talking, were they like, okay?
I was very into it. I thought the whole thing was a great plan. I think I was the only person who thought it was a great plan. Oh man, there we go. Yeah, okay, so here we go. So Seven Demons, essentially, in case anybody hasn't read the first book, in the first book, Jack Price was a perfectly ordinary, sensible cocaine dealer who had a very simple kind of violence-free supply line, which he liked very much, and he had a very simple, very profitable life. And into this blameless existence, somebody, for reasons he didn't know, hired the 7 most terrible people on earth to come and kill him. And Jack's reaction was, this is awesome, because now he could do all the terrible things and be the terrible person that he always kind of like thought about being, except that would be unnecessary and terrible. And so he was very excited. And the first book is basically just him gleefully being awful to the 7 most terrible people in the world. And but then when you get to the far end of that, I mean, there's a little spoiler thing here about kind of what happens at the end of the story, but Jack does not get smushed. And then you have, what do you do next? And he has a bunch of new friends by the end of the first book. And a lot of these friends are very dangerous people, and they're not the kind of people who take well to boredom. And so he has very dangerous people, and they are bored, and he needs something for them to do. And at that point, he makes what is possibly not a great decision about what they should do next. And so then we begin. This is just the very beginning of the second book. The first I knew it was all going wrong was when evil Hansel came running out of a pastry shop and stabbed me in the leg. And that was really just the best thing that happened that day. If you do not get stabbed in the leg by a 9-year-old once every so often, then that's nice for you. Hi, I'm Jack. Hi. And this story is about me, and I am the kind of person who has enemies who know 9-year-olds who will run out of a pastry shop and stab you in the leg. Not because they think it is a game, but because they are commercially minded fucking psychopaths, and that is the world. Hi. I did not know that Evil Hansel was called Evil Hansel at that point, and indeed it is not his actual name. Evil Hansel was a little Sound of Music looking motherfucker in actual lederhosen and a white frilly shirt, and he came out of the pastry shop like he was about to break into song, and then he stuck an oyster knife into my thigh so close to the femoral artery that I can still feel it in my sphincter. Now, if someone cuts your wrists, you have quite a long time before the problem is irretrievable. The femoral artery is like if you are a balloon animal. Sploosh, and that's it. Happily, Evil Hansel is left-handed, and I carry my billfold in my right-hand pocket. So what the little fuckhead actually stabbed was about 1,000 Swiss francs in 20s and 50s, which is totally appropriate because money is your sword and your shield here. Although I guess in that case, Evil Hansel should have stabbed me with 100, and he did not. He used an oyster knife. I did not have quite enough money in the right denominations, so the knife did absolutely pierce me in a tender region, and I was very unhappy. Doc said, "Do not touch the knife." I did not touch the knife because I am not a fucking idiot. I said, "What? Ow, what? What?" Evil Hansel did not respond to this question. Instead, he tried to twist the knife, and Volodya the sniper threw him under a car, and I do mean under because Evil Hansel just hunkered down and the chassis went right above him and he ran away. I said, "What the fuck is wrong with you, man? You couldn't aim for the wheels?" Volodya said Evil Hansel was lighter than he thought he would be. So that's Jack. That's how it is. Pretty much all the time.
That's so great. I love him.
Well, he's a terrible human being.
He is.
We all love him, but he is a terrible human being.
Yes. So I'm going to ask you some questions about that. But first, I'm going to ask you the first question. Well, the police apparently come to arrest me.
They're coming for me. Clearly, they found out.
Why the pseudonym? You mentioned in your video something about 2016. And also, I just wanted to mention Nick Harkaway is not your birth name. Like, that was a name that you chose.
I also made that one up. Yeah. I
would love to hear about you and names.
Okay. So let's do the whole thing. So my real name is Nick Cornwell. But I don't know if you've been in a bookshop recently, but if you go to the Cornwell section, at least in the UK, there are 10 million books by people called Cornwell. There's Bernard, there's Patricia, there's Susan, there's John, there's quite a lot of people called, there's Hugh, I think Hugh Cornwell had books as well. So there's quite a lot of people who write books called Cornwell, and quite a lot of them are very prolific. And so when I went into the bookshop, I was like, okay, no, there's just no way. Like I will, if I write one book a year for the rest of my life, I will not catch up with these people. So I was like, okay. So I needed a pseudonym, and then I wanted something that sounded adventurous and fun. So I went through Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, and one of the names that jumped out at me was Harkaway. And I wrote down a list. I had like kind of McQueen and Cantaloupe and a bunch of other things, and Harkaway was the one, thank God, that we ended up with. But then so in 2016, 2016 was a hell of a year, right? Is it me, or did a lot of things go wrong in 2016?
Yeah.
So a lot of things were going wrong in 2016, and I did not enjoy that experience at all. And I just finished writing Gnomon, and I started writing Gnomon as one of the things I wanted it to be was a kind of, hey, guess what? There are kind of fascists in the world again, and they are rising and feeling feisty. And I felt by the end of 2016, I really felt that I should have written that book faster. And I was in a rage, and I started writing. I didn't know what I was doing. I just sat down and I started writing this story about this terrible human being who was very funny, who just did awful things to the world because the world did awful things to him. And by the time I'd finished doing that, I had the first Jack Price book. And it didn't even take very long. And then it took forever to kind of crank through it and whatever. And when I first wrote it, I was just kind of deep in the throes of editing Gnomon, and I was like, okay, well, in Gnomon there is a novelist, Diana Hunter, and she kind of kicks off the whole story. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to put this out there as one of Diana Hunter's books. And she indeed had a book called Mr. Murder Investigates, which I thought was a great title. And I was like, I was going to doctor the Jack Price book to make it fit the title slightly. And then I didn't. And I decided that was a terrible idea and I should just let it be what it was. But I still wanted that connection. So I anagrammatized Diana Hunter, who is the novelist in the book, and Aidan Truhen is an anagram of Diana Hunter. And you know, I thought everybody would get that immediately because authors are self-obsessed and they assume that what you will do when you've read their book is sit there and anagrammatize the names of all the characters to find out whether they published a different book under a new pseudonym, because that's like naturally how human beings spend their time.
I mean, I never thought to do that. I was like trying to.
Well, because like, why would you? You're not completely nuts.
You know, I was like making words out of it. I came up with like urinated, I think. I was like, no, didn't work. But
you know, J.R.R. Tolkien did the same thing. He was actually George R.R. Martin as well, and he just changed the name.
So you're writing this Jack Price book, and
yes.
Does it feel like you wrote the second one, obviously knowing you weren't going to be Nick Harkaway, you were going to be Aidan Truhen. Yes. And does it feel different? Does it feel different when you write it? Does it feel more freeing?
Yeah.
Knowing that people don't know it's you, or?
No, they don't know it's me thing. I mean, that's kind of never really bothered me. I mean, I think it's pretty much established that I'm a lunatic by now. I don't think anyone cares. But I do, when I'm writing as Nick Harkaway, I'm taking on slightly different things. The books tend to be slightly more layered, slightly more considered. They tend to be a bit pointed. They usually have a kind of aim in view. I'm editing a book now, a Nick Harkaway book, which is about human cloning and the environment and whatever. And, you know, that's the kind of thing you can say about a Nick Harkaway book. You kind of go, you know, it's got these kind of themes and I want you to think. And what I say about the Aidan Truhen books is that they are just morally disimproving. They will just make you into a worse human being, and you'll have a great time as you slide down that slippery slope into, you know, kind of having a terrific life and disappointing everyone you know. You know, that's just kind of, that's what they are. And I genuinely feel like after this grim pandemic year, which has just been horrible for so many people, I actually just feel like, yeah, hell yeah, just have a dumb book about doing awful things and getting very rich. That's just fine, really. And let's all just kind of have a martini and relax.
It seems like it might have been very cathartic to write this character.
It's very cathartic. It's great fun just to kind of go, yes, this is an immoral process, and I'm just doing it anyway.
I mean, the Jack Price books, they have more violence, more sex, more all caps. Lots of all caps.
I don't think I have more sex. I always feel that I could get a bad rap for sex. Like there's not enough sex, and then I kind of go, God, maybe I should just write a book that's entirely about sex, and everyone would stop saying that. But yes, Jack definitely talks about sex a great deal, and yeah, it's true. This book in particular is quite rude. I mean, just occasionally in places, it's like obsessive.
Yeah. It's also very possible that because I'm an American, it feels like there's a lot of sex, you know, because we're all like yes to violence and no to sex. So any bit of sex is like, that's a lot.
I think but everybody though, I think like a lot of countries are like that. I mean, the UK is definitely also like that. In terms of like what gets shown on TV and stuff, is like kind of, good Lord, you know, by all means teach the children about terrible violence, but let them not know of sex. Which I have I mean, that's a Jack Price thing right there. I could build a whole book out of like why we do sex education the way we do. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, before I ask you my next question, I just want to do a side note that I still believe that Angel Maker has the greatest sex scene in anything I've ever read, with the apartment and the train. That's all I'm going to say.
I still blush. I still blush when I read that. But like, Jesus, did I actually tell people, like, did I say that? Yeah, I did. And actually, in a very real sense, this book is worse for that. It's definitely overtly ruder.
It's wild. So, having read both these books, I feel fairly confident that you could run, or possibly already do run, a criminal enterprise. Especially in the first book, because he has so many plans in place. And also Jack Price seems to take the hardest, most interesting choices and routes whenever something comes up. You know, he could just eliminate somebody, but instead he stages this whole elaborate plan. And I was wondering, not just that, but like how, you know, in the first one, like how he plans to get away from these people who are looking for him. He has all these secret accounts and secret names. And did writing about Jack Price require a lot of research, or were you just like, I just think this is what he would do if he was a criminal?
No, I mean 100%. I was absolutely like, I was kind of, what would be the most awesome or most appalling thing that could happen right now? What could he do that would just be very cool? And you know, and also like, you know, it feels to me like everybody kind of knows, like we've all seen Born Identity. You know, we kind of know how you get a passport out of your dead drop, or you know, we've seen the sort of various retreads of Day of the Jackal, that you know, you go and you find someone who's dead and you get their birth certificate and you get a passport. I was like, no, come on, let's, you know, what could we do now? You know, how would you tackle this? And you know, answer, obviously there would be a subscription service. You know, I mean, just kind of you know, and how much of this can you automate, and how much of it can you outsource? And if you do outsource it, how far can you subdivide crimes until they cease to be actually criminal? Like, you'd have to be a criminal conspiracy of one, like conspiring with yourself in order to commit a crime. Because one of the things about Jack in the first book, not so much in the second, is that, you know, he's broken down his crime. He's kind of systematized it so thoroughly that there are enormous numbers of people doing things which they do not realize are leading him to a crime. So there's a kind of, you know, how far can you get around RICO by just going, like, literally no one has any idea what they're doing.
So in the second book, now he has his own team, his own criminal team, 7 demons, who are kind of like the Dread Pirate Roberts of criminals, in which if they survive, they retire when they get old and someone else replaces them.
That is so good. That's what I'm going to be using that for like the next couple of months. I'm going to be like, they're the Dread Pirate Roberts of criminal teams. That's awesome. Thank you. Yes.
He definitely has an interesting grouping of 7 demons, though. And so I like it because in the first book, what happens to him, he's on top of it. You know, like there are very few things that are unexpected, but in the second one, they're just like, we just kind of have to work with what we have. And is that how you write, Jack? Or do you like plot him out very like, I want to do this and I want to do this and let's fit this in? Or are you just like, he's in a situation, what could I do with him now?
Yeah, I mean, so it actually turns out this is kind of a learning experience. One of the reasons that I was able to write the first book so quickly, and that was, you know, and it was kind of linear and boom, and I was like, hey, it's fantastic, was that I just spent 3 years writing an incredibly convoluted backwards and sideways book. And I learned a lot about writing doing that. And then doing the first Jack Price, I was like, wow, you can just blow straight through this stuff. And actually, as long as you kind of talk fast and have a linear plot, these things happen quite quickly. And, you know, and people will forgive an awful lot if you do it with flourish and style. You kind of go, you know, actually, you know, everybody knows you can't be protected from a bullet by a cigarette case that's in your top pocket. That's ridiculous. That's absurd. However, if you happen to have like a Kevlar titanium, you know, kind of cigarette lighter, which is just coincidentally in the way, that's absolutely fine. That makes perfect sense, you know, and so on. You just kind of, if you give people a new twist, they will buy even, you know, a fairly old device, you know, as long as, and you just keep moving through it, and it's fine and it's fun. And I wanted as many new devices as possible, but in the end, you know, in crime in particular, you know, there's a limited number of ways that you motivate, that you escape, that you whatever. So you have to put a new spin on it, and you've got to put lots of energy into it and move quickly. And then writing Seven Demons, I was like, well, hey, I'll be able to do this again. It'll just be simple, whatever. I was like, oh yeah, no. It turns out that if you're not writing a story where it's basically just one guy being the unexpected factor in the lives of seven awful people, if you are instead writing basically a kind of heist, Ocean's 11 kind of confidence thing with seven characters, that is an undertaking. That is a story that needs a certain amount of attention, and you're going to be, I mean, you can still hold it all in your head, but it's not going to be as completely straightforward. So this book took longer, which annoyed me enormously while I was doing it. But actually still not all that long, you know, and I had a great time with it, but it was a different experience. And I mean, sometimes I plan quite heavily. If I didn't have the city skyline behind me, you would be able to see the whiteboard on which I've written down all my tasks this week. I also spin it around and I story tree on it and I diagram on it. I have an extremely battered iPad here with kind of hundreds and hundreds of notes on various things, and I write story notes on that too, and again kind of tree diagrams and all the rest of it. But in the end, I very rarely go back and look at those things. Like, I diligently document the journey so that I can go back and look, but usually it's the process of actually having those thoughts and going through that tells me what to write next. And I used to write very linearly. When I started writing, when I was doing Gone Away World and Angel Maker, I wrote from beginning to end, and I saved up sequences that I was excited about to pull me forward through the hard bits, which is a respectable way of doing things. But as it transpires, the other thing that you can do, which is what I now do, is you just write the sequences that you adore, because you're always going to come back to them anyway. And it turns out that they often contain requirements and clues and keys to how to unlock bits of the story that are giving you trouble. So actually, you're not doing yourself any favors refusing to write those fun bits, because you're actually kind of keeping yourself from the stuff you need to know to solve the hard bits. So I write non-linearly now. I'll write chapter 1, chapter 7, chapter 5, chapter 9, whatever, you know, and just get on with it, and then I'll knit it all together.
And when you were writing the first one, did you already know that you wanted to do a sequel? Did you know that Jack was going to make it to the end of the first one?
Yeah, I knew Jack was going to make it to the end of the first one because I was unrepentantly just. He was just absolutely my catharsis for a really kind of terrible moment. And I was just kind of blazing my way through it. And he was going to come out the far side and he was going to win. I mean, that was just, you know, the whole point was, you know, an unreasonable intervention into someone's life, which they then spectacularly and completely disproportionately punish. And they win and they walk away and you care about them even though you shouldn't. And, you know, that was what I wanted. With this one is kind of, I mean, you know, this is a kind of Addams Family gag. It's, you know, it's a value inversion gag. It's like kind of, you know, here is this completely ridiculous, traumatic, terrifying anti-family, and he has to keep them all together and make them happy because somehow he's ended up as like the dad.
He is like the dad, now that you say that. Yeah. I would like to compliment you on your sound effects. Onomatopoeia, I guess, is what I'm going for here. Do you spend a lot of time in your office, like sounding out like what it would look like if you typed out elevator, like the elevator door sound? I was like, that's exactly what it sounds like closing. And so I just imagine you in your office, like making all these weird noises and being like, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. When I am not in kind of slightly wild-eyed discourse between the various different people that I currently am, I'm also making random noises and kind of writing down the swing or the whatever. And that is another reason why my office is at the top of the house and no one is allowed to come up here, because just my family they'll just occasionally my kids come up the stairs and they just kind of stand on the top step and they just look at me making these noises. Like, when we do that, you make us stop. What are you doing?
Now, I have to say, I think that there might be twice, if not 3 times as many sound effects in the second one as the first one.
It's entirely plausible.
Yeah. So this next question is one that I've always wanted to ask authors, but it's kind of macabre. But I feel like these are the right books and you are the right author to ask. So ask it. The people in these books are injured and or die in the most spectacularly inventive and horrifying ways. So I wanted to know, how do you decide how to kill a character? How do you decide that this character is going to die this way? And also, I would like to thank you, by the way, for ruining my happy childhood memories about building a potato gun with my father. But I'm just like, how do you decide, like, this is how it's going to go?
That one is particularly reprehensible. How do I decide? Honestly, it's like there are those lists of terrible things to do to your exes that people post on the internet sometimes, you know, and you think, wow, do people really do these things? Like, you know, do they really unscrew the curtain rails and pour frozen prawns into them and then screw the curtain rails back on? You know, and then in the summer heat, obviously the place becomes uninhabitable and they cannot work out where the smell is coming from. I mean, has anyone actually done that? And I'm sure someone has, but I was just sitting there and I was like, kind of, well, I mean, this is the ethos, right? Is kind of what completely nuts thing can you do, you know, to make a kind of appropriately spectacular. I mean, so I'm very fond of saying that the bad guy always defines hero stories. Any kind of hero story, it's actually about the bad guy, because the hero is necessarily a reasonably decent person or an anti-hero, but that, you know, you kind of know where you are with them, unless the book is going to turn on its head and they're suddenly going to turn out to be the villain, you know, whatever. But even then, right? But you kind of know where you are. But with the actual villain, with super villains, with Bond villains, with the villain in any kind of story with a kind of big concept that isn't frightened of being a little bit trashy and pop culture, whatever, it's all about the villain. You want to see them be outlandish and scary. You want to see them be Darth Vader. You want to see them be Blofeld. You want them to be that kind of scary person, and you kind of go, wow, yeah, no. And I mean, like in James Bond movies, I still think that one of the best James Bond villains is Sean Bean, because I believe that Sean Bean can beat Pierce Brosnan. Like I accept that as a possibility. You know, and it's 006 versus 007, and that's perfectly matched. You know, that's great. So in this context, in a way, the kind of the over the top mode of the violence is also definitive of what's going on, right? Because there are no saints in these stories. There's really only terrible people, and so you can't juxtapose villains versus villains in the same way as villains versus heroes. So it has to be, you know, these guys have to be outlandishly appalling, so that we know that we're on the side of the people who are so crazy that they come up with the cool stuff. Like, they don't just shoot people, they arrange for them to be hit by a kinetic harpoon strike. Like, you know, it's just so disproportionate. It's like they would do that to the teller in a supermarket. It would be like, this person has been offensive to the nice lady who was behind me in the queue, therefore I'm going to break into the secret Space Force computer and arrange a kinetic harpoon strike on this grocery store. You know, because that is who they are. And that tells you, you know, but the thing is also, it's like, again, it's a little bit like Hannibal Lecter. Like, we have to be able to believe, everybody believes this about Lecter, right? Everyone thinks, oh, well, I'd be friends with Lecter. Like, I would be polite to him, and I would be one of the people that he decided was nice, and he would not come kill me. I would be Clarice Starling, and I would not be that guy he eats. And Dr. Chisholm, Chilton, anyway, I will not be that guy. Actually, we all get cranky in the afternoons, you know, we're on the school run or we're doing whatever we're doing, and actually it's entirely conceivable we would be mean to Hannibal Lecter. But the fantasy we have to have, and that would be a bad thing, fantasy we have to have is that, like, you two can be a Jedi, you can make friends with Hannibal Lecter, and the cool kids who do the kinetic harpoon strike are your team. That's, you know, I think that's what's going on. Also, plus it's just great fun. It's just like, you know, in the kind of the comedy of the awful, you know, most comedically awful wins.
No, I mean, Jack Price is told that he's a bad person, but he doesn't really think that he's a bad person. He even says something like, I guess everyone is the morally conflicted hero of their own story, or something like that. And so he's often mentioned as an anti-hero. And I was wondering, why do you think people are drawn to anti-heroes? Is it something in us that's like, we wish we could behave like that?
Yeah, it's got to be partly that, hasn't it? It's kind of they get to do the stuff that we don't do because we are restrained by our own sense of morality. And I mean, actually, that was the point in the first book with Jack. You know, is that he's found a level for himself, and he loves what is essentially victimless crime. You know, he likes to do things without violence, and if a few people get high, that doesn't bother him. He doesn't see that as a problem. And then into this kind of, finely balanced moral equation, suddenly this team of international assassins are coming for him. And what that means for him in that moment is that the terms of engagement have changed beyond retrieval. Like, if you know for certain that if you don't go extreme, you will die, then you have license then to do anything. And that's what he suddenly discovers, is like, he has total freedom, he has resources, and he spent his last however many years daydreaming about the awful things that he would do if he were ever in such a position, which he never thought he would be. So he's got a kind of backlog of really awful things. And I think that's anti-heroes. I mean, certainly in this context, that's anti-heroes. There's also, I mean, the other reason people fall for anti-heroes is that they believe they can reform them and turn them into heroes. And there's always, it's basically the character that I wanted to be when I was at university, and to which I was radically unsuited because I cannot brood. Everybody wants to be the Byronic bad boy, everybody wants to, and it's a whole bunch of stories recently were kind of like, can you be the person who brings this anti-hero back to the true heroic path, which is probably an incredibly toxic myth that kind of deforms society in a terrible way. There is no question of anybody bringing Jack back to the light side, right? That is just not going to happen.
So before I ask you a couple more questions, I wanted to hold up the book which came out today, which is.
See, I don't have one of those yet. I want one.
Ridiculous that you don't have it. And then I wanted to ask you a question, because I was so excited to be asked to do this, because I'm a huge fan of your work, as you might be able to see behind me. I don't know which way I'm leaning. I have 6 copies of The Gone Away World, and
oh my God. Yes, you do.
Yeah, I get different editions from all over the place. And I wanted to ask you, have you seen the German edition of the first Jack Price novel? Because I was curious as to why this wasn't the title for the UK and the US, although I think I have a pretty good idea. Like the cover set. I'm going to hold it up. It's just the most amazing, amazing book title. I don't even speak German. I just ordered a copy from Germany because it's so incredible. I was like, this is my new favorite book title, and I can't even read it.
Not only have I seen that, I actually, when I was doing my live events, one of the things I would do was kind of, Aidan would kind of get up there a little bit sheepish, and he'd have the UK edition in his hand, and then it'd be like, I also have the German edition here, which is a little confusing to me, but not as confusing to me as it is to my aunt, who is a nun in Dusseldorf. Because it was nuts. I mean, they called me up and they said, here's our jacket design. I was like, yes, big giving the finger to the world book jacket design. That's great. And the skull ring, I mean, it's a little bit kind of more maybe heavy metal than Jack would go, but at the same time, he would totally buy one of those if he thought it was an important kind of criminal trapping that he was lacking. He would definitely get that and wear it and try it out. There'd probably be a whole riff about, I'm not sure this is really for me, but I kind of like it. It goes well with my business suit, whatever. And then they were like, and by the way, on top of this, we just want to call it "Fuck you very much." And I was like, in German, like, no, in English. I was like, okay. And actually, the story is that my editor there actually had the poster on the wall, on the front door of his apartment, like on the outside of it. And his neighbors were just like, what the actual fuck is going on here? Like, what is
amazing?
So yeah, I mean, it's a whole thing. And the French used the same jacket design, and then they titled it in French a respectable translation. Well, no, not a respectable translation, a solid translation of the same expression. So yeah, I am the author of two extremely profanely titled editions. And a little surprised by that, but you roll with it.
It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So, who is your favorite character to write besides Jack in these novels?
Who is my favorite character to write besides Jack in these novels? I mean, so recurring characters, it has to be Volodya, I think. Although I'm really keen on Doc and Charlie as well. I love them. Charlie's comic book career, I'm also slightly in love with. Like, I'm really into that. I think she needs to do much more of that. Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, I love all of them, right? I just enjoy them hugely because they're different from each other. They're kind of crazy. The Saul, the new addition in Seven Demons, I like, and I like Mozart too. We haven't really met Mozart properly, but you know, you start writing a book like this, and you're like, and I can have some candy from over here, and some candy from over here, and I can have an ice cream, and I can have a large glass of champagne, and I can have this, and I can have that, and I can do all of that at once because it's this kind of book. You know, and it's just great. It's like it really is like being a kid in a candy store. It's just kind of like obviously you can't actually be undisciplined about it, but you can come as close as you conceivably can in the process of writing a novel and still have it work.
It's funny you mentioned candy because I mean you have like evil Hansel, who in the stories follows, goes to the candy house, and now instead, how did you come up with a murderous, 9-year-old? Like where did they get home that made you think this is what's happening? Or
I really don't know how that happened. Actually, I just started writing. I mean, I have a small blonde son who is not quite that age, but he is in no sense a murderous psychopath. He's just kind of, I have no idea. I don't know where any of these things come from, really. I just kind of, I feel like I crash rocks together in my head and sparks come off and hit petrol, and that's what you get. And I mean, the whole, the character of Evil Hansel is it's another of these kind of Addams Family like things. It's just, there is this kid in this impossible situation who is nonetheless kind of evil and competent and terrifying, and he's a player in this story, and I love that. But I mean, sometimes, I mean, the discussion of modern art in the book, I mean, I have no idea where that came from, except that I have clearly always wanted to do a prolonged riff about kind of art bullshit and how much fun it is. So, that's in there too. It's just kind of, it is, as I say, you just kind of go, I want all of these things and I will have them now.
Now, are there any things that you wanted but then just set aside? You're like, that just doesn't work.
I really, the third book, if I get to a third book, which I hope I will. I mean, I'm crazy busy this year, but I'm really enjoying these books. I really want to get some koalas in there, and I feel like, as well, I feel like Jack's world. I wanted to mess with some cryptocurrency stuff a bit, and kind of generally. It's basically anything that I can think of that I find slightly obnoxious. I want to mess with.
Do you find koalas obnoxious?
Do I find koalas obnoxious? Yeah, they're secretly quite obnoxious. They're quite violent, koalas. People think they're kind of cute and cuddly, but they are absolutely kind of, if they feel like it, they will come for you. People try to hug them in the wild, and very bad things happen. They do not like being prized off that tree, and they will tell you in pointy and sharp ways.
I do have to say, I think right now, and if you ask me tomorrow, I might change my mind, but I think right now my favorite character is Lucille. He's kind of like Animal the Muppet in human form. He just yells his name a lot and goes wild.
I am still not sure. Like, I have a whole bunch of backstories in my head for Lucille, and I really thought they were going to come out in Seven Demons. I thought we were going to find out everything about him, and then we didn't. I'm quite good with that. I kind of like it, but sooner or later we've got to get a hint, surely. But I mean, Lucille's deep interior life. I mean, I love Lucille. Lucille, the great thing about a character like Lucille is also they're secretly magic. Like, if you have a character like Lucille, they are the character who, like in an Indiana Jones movie, you're in a submarine that's sinking and it's going down and down and down, and you get to the front, what's it called? Like the ballast tanks or whatever, and you need to blow the tanks, and you pull the lever and it just breaks off in your hand. And that's when you know that it's all going to go wrong and that the movie's just going to end halfway through and Indiana Jones isn't going to make it back up. And it's Lucille who's standing there who just happens to have a wrench. Like, he is the guy who can hand you a wrench and you just go, yeah, fine, it's Lucille, you know, because most of the rest of the time Lucille is like Baby Yoda. He's eaten something he's not supposed to, or he's been kidnapped or whatever, you know. But that's the other character that Lucille is like, is Baby Yoda from The Mandalorian. I just realized that.
Yeah. Who I refuse to call by his real name. I just think his real name, Grogu, is that it? It's ridiculous. I don't like it. I'm sticking with Baby Yoda all the way.
The other thing is, I mean, you know, there is a whole universe of time for it to turn out that he actually also is Baby Yoda. Like, you know, we have no knowledge. We know nothing about what they're doing, except that I really enjoy it. I'm just having a great time with it. We were watching it again the other night. Just like, this is actually, I love it for this. It's a very simple show. It's like the shows I grew up with. It's like kind of, it's an Incredible Hulk. It's a Bruce Banner kind of wanders the world. It's Richard Kimball from The Fugitive. It's like he's wandering around. He's not always particularly good at what he does, but he's nice to people, and he has I like his kind of combat ethos in a world of very polished martial arts moves. He's the guy who just walks into the room, gets shot a couple of times, doesn't matter, and he shoots them back. That's it, done. Like, boom. You know, and actually, I can't help but feel that's actually a more realistic way of dealing with the situation. Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, Lucille and Baby Yoda, just always eating the wrong thing and getting kidnapped, but at the same time, they can pass you the wrench. I'm
kind of impressed we sort of organically segued into a Star Wars conversation on May 4th.
Oh, May 4th! There we go.
Yeah.
May the 4th be with you. Look at that.
So speaking of cinema and film, have you given any thought to who you would want to play Jack Price if it was adapted? So that might be something.
I mean, have I given any thought to who I would have? I mean, yes, I think about all those things all the time. But the weird thing is that as soon as you actually fixate on someone, you end up kind of being unable not to hear them. So then they start saying the lines in your head, and then you're actually in big trouble. For a while, one of the things I did when I was doing book readings was do a kind of low-key impression of my American editor as Jack Price's voice. And then for a while, I could only hear Edward talking when I was trying to do Jack Price's dialogue. And Edward is one of the nicest people, and there is absolutely no way that he would go on a murderous rampage. And it really, for about a month, it was a real problem. I was like, kind of, this is just Jack being kind of measured and polite and sophisticated. He could probably do that, but he would have to be deep undercover, and he's really not supposed to be right now. You know, and I had to kind of exorcise Edward from my head before I could keep on writing the book. So the actors are very dangerous for me. I kind of, I fall in love with all of them, but I mean, actually, I think everybody has to make their own determination who should be Jack. I think it's very dangerous for authors to go around saying, I think it should be so-and-so.
So I have done enough of these events to know that there are always a lot of writers in the audience. So I thought I would just ask you what your process is like. Like, do you get up and write in the morning? Are you just like when you feel like it, or do you do it at night? Just if you could talk a little bit about how you do it.
It kind of, well, I mean, so it varies a lot. It has varied a lot throughout the time that I've been writing. I used to write in a very leisurely way, and I used to write always also from a kind of position of joy. I tried really hard not to do writing as catharsis and of pain and so on. I think that gets harder as you get older, or it certainly gets harder as more things piss you off. And so Jack Price was an extremely cathartic thing, although still, like, kind of, it was a joyful experience to write. Still is a joyful experience to write. So generally what I do is I get up in the morning, we have breakfast, I take the kids to school, and I come back and I sit down at my desk. My other half goes to work, and I work until either I pick up the kids or she does, or somebody else does for us, or whatever. And then they come home, and I keep working. But basically, when they get home, I'm probably going to be being dad. And I try, when I'm in full flow, I try to reckon 2,000 words in a day. And so I kind of, and if you do that, if you kind of grind that, you get a draft pretty quickly. But I mean, so this pandemic year just played, oh my God. So the most intelligent thing that I read was in the Chronicle of Higher Education by Aisha S. Ahmad early on. And she just said, I have experience with this stuff, and you will need to just relax and stop worrying about productivity in a pandemic. It's got to be self-defense, and you've got to be physically secure. You've got to feel stable. This is a long haul. This is a marathon. This is not like tomorrow. This is all going to be better. It was the smartest thing anybody said, still the smartest thing that anyone said about how to live during the pandemic period. And so I just didn't worry about it. I was busy being traumatized and horrified by what was happening all around me. And then it just completely messed up my writing. And then about 2 months in, it was okay again. And I started working. And then I did NaNoWriMo in November. Yeah, I wrote a book. I finished it off. Obviously, I had a hellish 3 months over Christmas, and I just got nothing done. My father died, and then I was looking after my mother, and then she died. It was just awful. And surprisingly enough, I did not have a great explosion of writing while that was happening during a pandemic. But I'm kind of, I kind of hold myself back up out of the pit. You put one foot in front of the other. And in beginning of March, I finished the book that I wrote in November, and I've been editing it, and it's with my agent now, and I'm super excited about it. So but that was done kind of on the NaNoWriMo schedule, just kind of like blaze through it, burn through it, and make it happen.
That's great. So I'm going to ask you a few questions now. I like to ask questions that have nothing to do with writing or books, just kind of like fun questions. I do want to remind people watching at home that you can put questions in the Q&A box down there, and I will get to those after we do this. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and while they do sound like I might be trying to guess your bank account passwords or answers, these are just for fun. So if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Wow. One food, not like one kind of food. Like it's got to be like a single.
Decide for yourself. Like some people say pasta. There's a lot of options,
Pasta. Oh my God! If I could say pasta, that would be great. It's like I love pasta. There's so many good things in pasta.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah. I mean, there's also. I mean, the other thing is, I'm a sucker for really great desserts. I mean, they're not exactly what you would call nutritious, so I would obviously not do well on a pure diet of that. But there is a lemon layer pudding, which is just one of my favorite things on earth, which is basically like a lemon souffle. It's just unbelievable. I love that. There's a whole bunch of things that I love food. Oh my God, I love food. We had to start cooking. We had to start cooking crazily during the pandemic because obviously all the restaurants were closed. It's just, and we were just kind of sitting there going, okay, today we are doing the ottolenghi lamb shawarma, and then tomorrow we will do, whatever. And it's a question also, it's fascinating. It's a question of what, in the early days, it was a question of what you could get your hands on in terms of ingredients and seasonings and spices and so on. So everything had to be kind of like, wow, so today we're making this because that's what we happen to have in the fridge. It was actually really exciting in a kind of terrible, appalling way. But the food was good.
Do you have any pets?
This is actually super exciting. We do not have any pets, but in a couple of weeks, we're getting a dog. We're getting a lurcher puppy. So it's a whippet crossed with a terrier. And my family have never lived with lurchers before. I have. So I know that we are basically letting a Jack Price dog analog into our home. They are just incredibly ingenious, brilliant, and fundamentally criminal. And there's nothing you can do about that. You're just doomed from the beginning. So we're going to be in a battle of wits with this dog, and I will predict right now that we will lose within 6 months. So
do you already know which dog you're getting? Have you given it a name?
Yeah, we got a name. The dog is called Blue, after the raptor, and she has blue eyes. But as it transpires, although we thought her coat would be kind of slate gray blue, but in fact it looks as if she's going to be brown. and thus life kind of continues to be extraordinary. I was unable to persuade my family to call her Goose, Tycho, or kind of, Duchess Pimpernel, but Blue is a good name. So
Duchess Pimpernel sounds very absolutely fabulous. Like maybe she would be on there. So definitely absolutely fabulous.
I mean, I feel like they were very, very staid about the whole thing because they saw themselves standing outside in the park yelling, "Duchess Pimpernel, come here!" Arguably that would be reasonably awful. Whereas, but I thought Goose would be good. If you're yelling Goose in the park, that's got to be because that's like it's got a whole Top Gun reference thing going on. At the same time, it's like quite a cool name for a dog. Anyway, they didn't go for it, so Blue it is, which I also like. That's my raptor.
So I'm going to ask you one more, and then I'm going to ask you these questions that we have here. What was your first concert? If you go to concert, I mean, not everyone even has one.
My first concert. Does this have to be like a concert for something anybody would know the name of, or can it be just like a really obscure band in a pub? There was the first one that I can remember was a band called Purple Dawn who played a gig in a pub in Camden Town, and all I remember really was that they were great and slightly gothy or very gothy, and I thought the lead singer was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. I was about 16. But I mean, so standard concert experience.
That's amazing. I myself cannot say that I've heard of Purple Dawn. I wonder if they still play together.
I do not believe that anybody did, really. I think that was pretty much if they managed a few more gigs after that one, I thought they were great, but I did not hear of them in the popular music charts. I do not believe kids loved them, except me. So I'm guessing it didn't go very far, but maybe they all went on to fame and fortune in other bands.
It's true. You never know. They might have pseudonyms.
Yes,
maybe
people do that. I hear people do that. If they're very dishonest, they have pseudonyms.
So while speaking of that, I'm going to ask you the first question, which is from Anonymous, which is fitting. Do you have other pseudonyms, and will you do more?
I do not. I actually did consider having one more, or maybe lots more. I wrote I wrote a book which was a sort of riff on those sort of Lord Peter Wimsey kind of detective stories, and I finished it, but I never quite kind of felt that I nailed it, and it's sort of sitting in my bottom drawer. But when I was fantasizing about publishing a kind of P.G. Wodehouse, George MacDonald Fraser, Peter Wimsey riff, I thought that I couldn't possibly publish anything so outre under my own name, so I would, or under Aidan Truhen's name, so I would need another pseudonym. And my agent here, Patrick was just like, Nick, I cannot keep adding random nonsense biographies to my corporate website just because you don't want to own up to the crazy shit that you do. You're just gonna have to get on with it. I was like, okay. It's very weird. Like, I mean, I should apologize to everybody who kind of asked me flat out, is this you? And I was like, no, it's not me. Because
why keep a secret?
Because I felt very guilty about it every time, and I was very deceptive. And I honestly don't really remember why it was so important that we do this, but it was definitely something that people wanted me to do. They were very uncomfortable with the idea of having Nick Harkaway having these two things going at the same time, and da. So this is kind of practical consequence. But I don't think anybody remembers, and I'm going to guess that if you had any of my editors here, they would say it was my idea to have a second pseudonym rather than theirs. Like, I think we would all blame each other, and it's been great fun. And I still I feel like if there is demand, I would happily kind of go and do stuff as Aidan with my ridiculous mask and my selection of funny voices. It's kind of funnier now that everybody knows it's me, right? I can just take it off and go, it's way too hot under here, I'm terribly sorry, I'll just do the funny voice, because obviously it's much funnier if you're English and you apologize for everything at one time. Oh my god. Yeah, anyway.
It sounds more sincere when you're English and you apologize for everything.
I'm not sure it does. I think it just makes it sound as if we just we say sorry constantly, just I don't know. Anyway, yeah, no, so I don't have any more pseudonyms, although obviously I would say that. But no, I kind of want coherence. I quite like the idea of everybody knowing it's me and just kind of getting on with it.
No, Peter is asking if your November book is going to be a Nick Harkaway or an Aidan Truhen book, or
That is a very, very good question. Or another pseudonym. No, it's going to be a Nick Harkaway book, I think. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't be. It's interesting, actually, because I mentioned it the other day. It's kind of a fusion of the two ethoses, in that it's a kind of Harkaway-ish book. It's slightly science fictional, and it's at the same time slightly noirish and kind of it's a little bit dry humor and so on. So it's a little bit Aidan as well. And I like the crossover.
So Jen says, you write so cinematically, these absolutely feel like a movie. Do you see the action sequences as you're writing them?
I always see the action sequences as I'm writing them, and I often work them out in my head. I think it's kind of an open secret that I'm the world's worst martial artist. It's a tough competition, but every year we all get together, and I have been the reigning underdog 48 years in a row. That said, I did study a bunch of them, so I understand the kind of kinetics of the human body, and so I always kind of find myself pacing things out, or kind of thinking, hang on, how would that feel like if I was ever actually able to get that flexible or do that thing, get that move right? How would it have felt? Where would the body weight go across the back, across the thigh, whatever? And I flatter myself that makes the action sequences more fun, and so I pace them out, I block them in my head, and so on. And I was a script writer. I was catastrophe at it at the time. I think I didn't know enough about how to do it. I kind of know more now. But I was a script writer, so I have a lot of practice visualizing and thinking cinematically. So I'm glad the books read cinematically. I always hope they will.
So building off that, because you did mention knowing like how bodies move and stuff, people have a lot of injuries in these books. And I was wondering if you had to do a lot of research into like, if someone gets shot in the ankle, their head isn't going to fall off. Like you need to make it realistic. Like, did you have to read a lot about these kinds of wounds? And again, I'm being really
the first thing we should do is draw a hard line under the idea of the violence in these books being realistic. I mean, it's grotesque and appalling. My search history must be I must be on every single intelligence agency watch list in the world. I mean, just like, if they are doing anything, they should be anybody who searches for the things I search on. They must be coming to my house. And I figure then there is some guy sitting somewhere in a back room whose job it is to kind of go through this and analyze it. And that guy is just sitting there like, oh my God, this is boring. His real life is the most boring thing. And I still have to read about, kind of water pressure injuries and whatever. No, I mean, I do a lot of research, mostly because when you're doing stuff that is fantastical, you owe everybody at least the fig leaf of plausibility, Mm-hmm. So I research chemical reactions and I research distances. You can't shoot someone with a sniper rifle from 23 miles away. So, I do not, I do not do that. But even as I say that, right, Jack is exactly the guy who would be like, well, clearly, since you can't do that, that is what we need to do. So first thing we need to do is build a gun that can fire from 23 miles away. And the second thing we need to do is create a targeting system that would allow it to work, and then we need to find a way to keep someone still for the kind of whatever it is, 6.5 minutes that it's going to take for the bullet to fly from one place to another. I mean, because 23 miles, you could literally just kind of get bored and walk off and it would miss you, right? So, that's exactly the kind of thing that he gets himself into is he has these thoughts and it's okay. So you wanted to know how this stuff happens? That's how it happens. Someone says something like that. And I'm kind of like, well, 23 miles away, why not? That's a terrific idea. Why not from a moving car as well while you're at it?
So this has been so much fun. I'm going to wrap it up here. We have a comment, not really a question. It's from Jerry. It says, not really a question, just how, all in caps, how did I not know about your pseudonym? Very excited. You have made my day, month, pandemic, off to buy the books. Thank you so much for all the words.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And I want to say thank you. Thank you for inviting me to do this. Thank you for chatting about this.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you. I mean, that was fun. Let's do it again.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe
Okay.
like in the middle of the day this time, so you're not up in the middle of the night.
Really late over there. Thank you so much to Nick, to Liberty, and everyone who logged in tonight. We are honored that it was here, that everyone discovered the true identity in Truhen. If you haven't bought the book yet, we've got the link in the chat.
Do that. It's very good.
Yeah, so you must buy it. And if you missed the event for any reason, including the big reveal, we'll have it on YouTube soon. Thank you.
Yay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. There we go.
Bye.
Bye.